pencil crayons, the littlest hobo, beachcombers, Timbits, Ron McLean and Don Cherry, Crappy Tire, Fred Penner, Mr. Dressup, The Log Riders Waltz, a 2-4, Shinny, a double-double, Loonies and Toonies, Le fait que je parle un peu français. These are things I'm proud of, today and every day. Happy Canada Day. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Northern Revolutions. I'm Rob. Welcome back if you're returning. Welcome if you're new. Today is July the 1st. That means Happy Canada Day. What's Canada Day? Good question. My American boss asked me that the other day. Canada Day is kind of like our Independence Day, essentially. July the 1st, 1867, the British North America Act was passed into law by the British Parliament, granting Canada our independence. So, July 1st is Canada Day. It's our country's birthday. And in honor of that, I thought I would do a Canadian video. Of course, I'm the self-proclaimed ambassador of Canadian music in the VC, so why not? Another excuse to talk about Canadian music that no one's going to care about. In honor of today, wearing my Jays hat, obviously. But I got to represent my other favorite sports team, the Montreal Canadiens. And given how shitty the Jays are doing, wearing their jersey might be a little too much right now. Nevertheless, I thought today I would do something about Canadian music, which, let's face it, I do pretty much all the time. I've seen a few other folks do, their favorite Canadian artist or whatever. But I thought today I would do a video about 5 songs that I feel really resonates with the Canadian experience. Every discussion about Canadian music, frankly, needs to start with this guy, Gordon Lightfoot. I don't know that there's anyone who has written more songs about the Canadian experience than this man. He is the legend among legends. He is the one by which all others are measured. He is the guy that started it all, and he is revered by all as our greatest singer-songwriter. So, pretty easy to pick some songs from him, but I'm going to pick the Canadian Railroad Trilogy. The song was commissioned in 1967 by the CBC, which is our national radio and television broadcaster owned by the government. They commissioned Gordon Lightfoot to write a song to celebrate the bicentennial of our independence. So Gordon wrote the Canadian Railroad Trilogy, and it is a 7.5-minute song, and it's kind of 3 movements, and it is about the construction of the Canadian Pacific Trans-Canada Railroad, which was finished in 1885. And that is sort of, it holds a pretty significant place in Canadian history, because when Canada was founded, or when we became Canada, it wasn't, we did not look like what we look like today. There was the settlement in British Columbia, there was the Maritimes, there was part of what is Quebec and part of what is Ontario, and a whole lot of nothing in the middle. So it took almost 20 years, but the Canadian Pacific Railway completed a railroad that spanned coast to coast, and that was sort of the first thing that united Canada as a country, and sort of brought us together. And it's considered to be sort of a, the first milestone in our fledgling nation. Nowadays, it's also, looked upon with some negativity as well. I mean, there was a mass expropriation of native land, a large loss of native life, and also the life of Chinese laborers that built the railroad. You can read all about that. I'm not commenting on politics, but while it is historically incredibly significant, like a lot of history, from several hundred years ago, it's marred with some darkness. But Canadian Railroad Trilogy is a song that celebrates sort of the first milestone, the first thing that kind of gave Canada an identity or made us a country. Originally, Gord put this out in 67 on his album The Way I Feel, and then he re-recorded it for Gord's Gold, which is his greatest hits, in 75. It's obviously different recording, but he also has sort of orchestration in this. So the version on here is a little more robust, I guess. The next song I want to talk about is from this guy, Tom Cochrane and Red Rider. Tom Cochrane is another one of those guys that is a very revered singer-songwriter and musician in this country. This album came out in 1988, and it's called Victory Day. And there's a song in here called Big League, and it's a song about hockey. I mean, a very big part of our national identity is tied to hockey. It's unfortunate the Stanley Cup has not been to Canada since 1993, when my beloved Habs won it last. But nevertheless, we are a hockey nation, and we are a breeding ground for hockey players. And when you look at the rosters of any of those Stanley Cup winning American teams, there's a hell of a lot of Canadians on there. This is just part of our cultural fabric. Hockey is our game. And the song Big League is about a parent with aspirations of their son playing in the big league, the NHL. And it evokes that very common Canadian experience of being up at 5 o'clock in the morning and driving through the snow to the hockey rink and watching your kids do hockey practice or playing it on the frozen lake or, whatever. It's a very, very Canadian thing, obviously. I mean, I'm sure it's happens in the U.S. as well. But, I mean, this is a very cultural sort of touchstone. In the song, however, the protagonist's son gets a scholarship on a big U.S. team and is ultimately killed in a traffic accident. It's purely a fictitious story. It's not based on anybody real, but the whole motif of early morning hockey practices and the fact that, the desire to have one's child succeed in hockey being a driving force of a lot of parenthood in this country is a very culturally resonant experience. So Tom Cochrane and Red Rider, Big League. Next one I want to talk about is, I think, an undiscovered national treasure. I've said it before. Adam Baldwin. This whole album speaks of the experience of life in Eastern Canada in the Maritimes. But the song that I wanted to talk about is called The Voice of the Eastern Passage. It's Adam's loving tribute to Seaside FM 105.9, which is a community radio station in Eastern Passage, Nova Scotia, which is right on the coast. It's a suburb of Halifax. It was started by a gentleman named Wayne Harrott in 2002. He started broadcasting out of his house, and now it is a thriving community radio station. Wayne unfortunately passed away of cancer, I believe, in 2021. This is subtitled Wayne's Serenade, and it's really about the reach that Wayne and his radio station had throughout the surrounding area and the surrounding community. And it's kind of about, driving through the back roads of Nova Scotia, which pre-remote, if your radio catches the signal from Shore FM, you sort of feel like you're almost home. And I think, listen, I've only been to Nova Scotia once, but this is a common thing that I think is relatable to a lot of folks. Our country is massive, and it is largely unpopulated, 95% unpopulated. There's a lot of stretches of long, lonely, empty road, and the only thing to keep you company on a lot of those long drives is the radio. This is something everyone can relate to. Put it into perspective for my American friends. I live in Ontario, very close to the US border, as does most of the population of Canada. However, Ontario, from side to side, is roughly the same distance as San Francisco to Dallas. Just let that sink in. That's how large this province is, and it is almost entirely unpopulated, except for the southern peninsula around the Great Lakes. So, community radio and community broadcasting, very important part of the Canadian media consumption, and those long drives where you only have the radio to keep you company. It's a very common thing that resonates with all of us. Okay, this one is historical. This one goes back quite a ways. This is the band Northern Lights Southern Cross. There's a song in here called Acadian Driftwood. It is about the expulsion of the Acadians in 1775 to 1765, roughly. Acadia was part of what is now Nova Scotia. It was a colony of New France. Canada, before it was Canada, was occupied by the British and the French. There was British North America and there was New France. Ultimately, England took control over all of the French territory and it all became Canada eventually. But Acadia was a colony of New France. And during the 7 Years' Wars, it was called in Europe, or the French and Indian Wars here in North America, when the British took control of Acadia, the Acadians, who were French-speaking, refused to pledge a oath of allegiance to Britain. They wanted to remain neutral. And ultimately, what happened is they were deported over a period of about 10 years, some to France. Many of them fled to New England and some of the northern states. And the land was resettled by the British. A terrible thing. Many of the Acadians actually ended up in Louisiana and were a key component of what became Cajun culture. The word Cajun actually derives from Acadian. So this is a song about the forceful removal of the Acadians from Nova Scotia. And I'll end with a fun one. Yeah, of course, I'm going to show Blue Rodeo. Off their most recent album, Many a Mile. I could show any one of a dozen different Blue Rodeo songs, but I'll show this one because it's fun. On this album here, which came out in 2021, there's a song called The Opening Act. And it's a fun story written by Greg Keeler. And is about Blue Rodeo embarking on a tour. And as the tour starts, Greg is really not into it. And with each date along the tour, he gradually gets a little more into it and a little more into it, to the point where at the end, when they reach Vancouver, he's kind of hit his stride. It's humorous, but it's funny because Blue Rodeo have a reputation for touring, and they've toured for 40 years, and they tour every year in the winter on purpose. They tour every, December, January, February, March, every year across Canada. They hit the big cities, they hit the small cities, and that's how they've, sort of garnered their fan base over the years. They're out on the road when no one else is. Canada in the winter is a dark and lonely and often desolate place, depending on where you are. And so these guys are out there on the road, trying to bring a little bit of, happiness to folks in, the dog days of February when it's pretty gloomy. And Greg starts off pretty gloomy, but by the end of the tour, he's having a blast. So it is a very fun song, and it traces a tour from Toronto all the way out to Victoria. So a very fun song, the opening act. There you go, folks. Just a quick one. A few songs that sort of, resonate with the Canadian experience. Happy Canada Day to all of my fellow Canucks at home and abroad. We're very fortunate to live in what we think is the greatest country in the world, and very proud to be a Canadian. So happy Canada Day, everybody. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the flip side.